All right, this is part 2 of talking about Operator, this classic masterpiece by Jim Croce. I feel that this may be his best song. Time in a Bottle is up there, and Bad Bad Leroy Brown. A lot of great songs like this one. You know, most of his songs were 3 or 4 verses that I've listened to. The more famous ones, and in the third verse, there's the turnaround. There's some kind of almost like a punchline, like in Bad Bad Leroy Brown, and in Don't Mess Around with Jim. There's kind of a punchline. There's, they get their comeuppance, and in this song Operator, there is there's a turnaround as well. What I mean by that is, when you think about the chorus versus the verse, the verses, everyone listens to the chorus, and that's generally what most people remember about the song. A lot of people do not listen to the verses, right? They don't actually listen to the lyrics, or they don't listen to them, when they're younger. But when they get older, like me, they start listening to the verses and start trying to understand what the song is actually about. And a lot of times, like with Croce's songs, the verses subvert the chorus, meaning that he's saying something a little, sometimes the opposite of what what the chorus is saying. And that's a lot of great songs do that, actually, especially in the rock, in the classic rock catalog of songs. I'll talk more about that. But one interesting thing about Operator is that after the third verse, where he says to the operator, "You can keep the dime, thank you for your time, you can keep the dime. There's no one I really wanted to talk to." And then he does the chorus again, which goes back to, "Isn't that the way they say it goes? But let's forget all that." So he's kind of saying, and just give me the number if you can find it. So he's kind of going back to saying, yeah, you can keep the dime, thank you for your time, but actually give me the number. I do want to call. So you could read it that way. Otherwise, why would he go back to the chorus? I mean, it does bring the song to completion, you could say, but he did that for a reason. I'm almost certain that he put the chorus after that third verse for a reason, and it was to bring in, so that you could think a little bit more about what is really being said in the song. It's a brilliantly written song, and the first verse, he's asking the operator to help him place this call to his woman who left him for his best friend, who's now his ex-best friend, named Ray. He doesn't give the name of his girlfriend. And second verse, he's crying. He can't see the number that the operator gave him because he's crying. And the third verse, he says, let's forget about this call. It's a very beautiful song, and it might even make you cry, which I also believe that he was going for there. There's something in my eyes that happens every time. So I was bringing up in the last video, the second verse he says, I ended the last video with the second verse where he says, I can't see the number you gave me. I was thinking that this love was going to save me. That was the rhyme. We think, isn't that the way they say it goes? We always think, we tend to think that our romantic partner is going to save us somehow, is going to help clean up our life and make us the person that we truly want to be. Now, I believe that partnership can do that. It can bring out the best in us, can also bring out the worst in us. But unfortunately, when it does bring out the worst in us, it is because we suffer from that illusion that the other person is going to save us, and if they don't save us, or they don't live up to the person that we thought that they were, or maybe they were at the beginning when we were also the person that they wanted us to be, and which we were, then we become disillusioned. Is that a bad thing? Who knows? Maybe that is getting closer to the truth of things, which is that nothing outside of ourselves can really save us. That's up to us. That's a choice that we have to make. Now, it would be so wonderful to pick Jim Croce's brain and hear from him what the song means for him and how he wrote it. I think it's one of the best. I've been studying songs and songwriting for a long time, and it's definitely one of the best songs under 4 minutes that I've heard in terms of the writing. And he wrote a lot of great songs. That's why he's Jim Croce, and we're still talking about him 50 years later. Anyway, the operator, he could be talking to God. The operator, could be essentially, the song is all made up. First of all, it's a made up song. It was partly based on soldiers. He was in the army, and soldiers calling home to their girlfriends or their wives. So it was based on real life, but obviously it's made up, and he's trying to get something across, which is he's still suffering from the loss, but I think he's also going back and forth, and he wants to, in the process, he's he's obviously the narrator. He's the writer of the song and the narrator. Well, it's not a song about him per se. So we have to ask, what is the greater message that he was trying to get across in writing the song? He's not the guy making the call, or maybe he is. He was. So one thing that I found out in the last video, I was wondering, because I was pretty sure he was from the Philadelphia area, and he was. And then he moved to New York. He actually got married in the mid-60s to his wife, Ingrid, and he converted to Judaism, which I thought was interesting. And he was buried in a Jewish cemetery. That tells you something about him, I think, that he converted to his wife's religion. And apparently, I looked into her book about him, didn't paint the greatest picture of him, which is, I'm not quite sure why she would, you know, maybe she was just being honest, and she, for the sake of honesty, and to not just write a, as they say, a hagiography, meaning the saint's life of Jim Croce, the guy that we think that he was based on listening to his songs. Certainly, we all have demons, and let's say this, that I think he died before he was 30, or maybe he had just turned 30, 1973. By the way, before I go on, Pigpen of the Grateful Dead, who also wrote a song called Operator, died the same year, and he was about the same age, a little bit younger. It's interesting that they both wrote a song called Operator. They both died that same year, not too long apart from each other. They both had a handlebar mustache. And you could probably do a dissertation on that. But when I think back to what I was like, before the age of 30, I was pretty fucked up. So, I'm not surprised if Jim Croce had his demons and his things that he was working through. But, first of all, when you listen to him, he sounds ancient. He doesn't sound like a guy under 30 years old. Just like Jim Morrison, or some other people, you wouldn't think that Jim Morrison was 20, 25 or 24 or even younger when he recorded some of those songs, because he sounds old. Jim Croce seemed like a very mature individual. If you watch, I just watched some stuff on YouTube of him. He was a mature guy for his age. Another thing I learned was he drove like 300,000 miles in 2 years with his wife, crisscrossing the country playing gigs, which is incredible. 300,000 miles, wow, in 2 years. So he really gave a lot to his art. He really put the time in, he put the love in, the devotion, and it paid off in the end for him. Now, I do want to bring in, the fact that he, so anyway, Ingrid's autobiography, which I have not read, or not autobiography, but biography of him, does not necessarily paint him in the best light from what I've read on the Amazon reviews. And I would say that maybe there's some sour grapes there. Maybe she was trying to get back at him for some reason. It's hard to believe that she would, given that he was dead. But let's just talk about for a moment where this is the Gospel of Rock. So Jim Croce, his initials are JC. Now, I don't, you could say, a lot of people would hear that and they'd say, oh, come on. But you can't deny that this guy wrote some incredible songs that moved a lot of people in that very short window of time, like 72, 73, and then he died, and he was he was just like 30 years old. It's interesting. It's something to think about. I once wrote a little essay about all the artists, particularly the rock artists that had a J in their name, who died young. There are many of them. If you just, start with Brian Jones, the 27 Club, Brian Jones and Jim Morrison and Janis Joplin and Jimi Hendrix, Jim Croce, John Denver. Quite a number of them have the J in their name. And you think of the J with the hook, the fish hook and the fishers of men. And there could be something to it, and maybe not. But it's an interesting thing to bring up, I think. Anyway, isn't that the way they say it goes? But let's forget all that. It's interesting to look at the verses, if and that chorus contraposed to or juxtaposed with the verses. Isn't that the way they say it goes? So the third verse, when he says, you can, forget about this call, let's forget about this call, you can keep the dime. And then he says, isn't that the way they say it goes? Isn't that the way the story goes? Like, all right, I'm not going to make the call, but let's forget all that. So I am going to make the call. And I think the call too is a metaphor for the call for God, call to God, calling God and asking for help, or calling to God for understanding, to understand something, and especially with relationships, that could be the hardest thing when when someone leaves you, or when you break up with someone. It can be devastating, and that's where a lot of people, I think, myself included, really go deep within themselves, and they find it. Oftentimes, you hit rock bottom, and then you have to find your way back somehow, and it might include calling God. So anyway, those are my rambling thoughts on this incredible song. Thank you for listening, and this is the Gospel of Rock, and I'll see you with the next song. I think it might be Blue Sky by the Allman Brothers. Signing off. 3, 2, 1.